Alright, time for some more illogic. Last time we went over our draft for the Wooper Club League Season 15. Please go check out that video first if you have not done so already, as we covered our draft in full, including some of the rules for the draft and season, and going over each of our Pokemon and the roles they serve in the team. You can see them before you now, as you can also see the topic of today's video, our Week 1 matchup against Michael, Fruit Taco of the Route 1 Birbs. Timestamps are in the description. I've gotten to know Michael pretty well over the past several seasons, ever since our crazy gym leader season battles against each other in Season 7, in which my introduction to him was a utility umbrella set that actually worked, and then I overcame him in the Season 8 quarters with an Arctivish sweep, and then again in the Season 9 semifinals, in which the Noctowls and I defeated him and the Wobbuffets, thwarting their crazy setup strategy with some help from Tangrowth alongside Zapdos and others, that semifinals match coming after beating him 2 times in the regular season as well. Since then, though, it's been a little worse for us, dodging Michael as he won Season 10, and then trading wins in Season 11, though he got the better of me in the semifinals en route to another title. 2 outstanding matches between us that stopped my streak of, 6 straight wins against him? Sheesh. Unfortunately, we traded wins again in Season 12 to the exact same tune, a real nice and convincing win in the regular season before dropping in the semifinals in another good match, both of course detailed on this channel, though we dropped that finals matchup. We haven't faced off since then, dodging him in the regular season and playoffs en route to a finals loss in Season 13, and dodging him in the regular season in Season 14 before taking the crown. So, to be clear, he's the reason it's only been 2 straight finals appearances instead of 4. That means we're going to be going for some revenge, and a poetic return to the channel being against the same coach who defeated me in our last video that I uploaded here before the draft. Enough of that, though. Let's talk about the Birbs. Michael had the 3rd overall pick, and despite Chen-Pao still being available, he said that he did not take it on account of already featuring it on his Season 12 team, instead going Iron Valiant, a mon I don't think I've beaten in draft yet, which is probably that much more terrifying. Alongside his 3rd overall pick are Lycanroc-Dusk, Jumpluff, Delphox, Moltres-Galar, Rotom Frost, Raging Bolt, Crocalor, Fortress, Gastrodon, and Amoonguss, with Valiant, Jumpluff, and Rotom being able to freely Terra. This is a real weird team. Similar to me, I think we're trying something a little different, and both of us definitely felt the constraint of a lowered point total, despite us being the main culprits of a more accurate tiering list. Cinderace features as the fastest in the matchup, but he's got Booster Valiant, an incredible priority in Accelerock and Thunderclap. Add a natural bulk from Raging Bolt, Fortress, Gastrodon, and Amoonguss. We've actually got a lot to look out for, and not all that many spammable moves. If there are any issues, it'd be those slow walls being pretty similar to each other and potentially allowing one to set up on them, as well as the skew that I'm seeing towards special offense. After Lycanroc, Iron Valiant tends to be mixed, but Delphox, Moltres, Rotom, definitely Raging Bolt, all are special leaning. Even the Valiant and Fortress tend to rely on fighting coverage, just like Lycanroc, so physical walls that can resist fighting feel like an automatic bring for that side. And for the rest, Assault Vest feels like a real easy, obvious pick. Of course, if you select Assault Vest, how are you setting up on the walls? So that's what we're going to have to try and work around and figure out. Though, of course, I'm really not going to go out of my way to work around Jumpluff. This thing that really does not do much of anything. Maybe it'll sacrifice itself to get a Tailwind, Leech Seed a switch in because I don't have a Grass type, Acrobatics, I don't really know what it does. I'm still pretty confident my entire team beats it, but I am very interested to see what Michael has in store for it the week that he does bring it. The rest of his team actually have some pretty interesting uses each, but we'll start with Crocalor, I suppose. Its niche is to stop and force out setup early and efficiently between Unaware and tools like Yawn and Slack Off, often paired with Terra, but not here. Frankly, I don't have much setup, and even without the strongest water, ground, and rock coverage, it really doesn't do that much to me, especially on the wrong side of a momentum move. I kind of hope it comes, if only so I can set up on it, but that probably doesn't happen, even if it looks pretty nice as a Cinderace check. Though what is it doing back? Not entirely sure. Fortress is an awkward one. It's Michael's Dragon Resist, aside from Iron Valiant, and it's his primary hazard removal, as well as providing Body Press and Steel offense, among others, with hazards of its own, plus Volt Switch. I'm well aware of the tools it has, having used it pretty well back in Season 13, but here it's pretty tough. I have a pretty healthy amount of special offense to break through relatively easily, plus Cinderace on the physical side, plus Iron Hands couldn't really care too much less about it, giving the mons that already look in the matchup a good look against this too. But he may be forced to bring it anyways to spin and get up hazards. I'm interested to see if it comes, or if one of the defoggers needs to pack defog, and what his approach there will be. It's getting a little tough now. I'll go with Amoonguss next, as aside from sports not helping all that much, it could take advantage of some of my passive mons, I suppose, and could sponge hits from Iron Hands theoretically, but it's another mon I see to take advantage of. If I can slap on a pair of safety goggles, I'm good. I think Michael knows that. I'm not really anticipating it to come. Finally, I guess I'll say Delphox. I have a few pretty nice answers to the Speedy Fox, not the least of which is Latios, who resists both stabs and outspeeds, plus can just flip turn out if needed. Cinder can take a hit. Cloth would actually be a real nice answer aside from Willow. Spadef and Polion is real nice too. Bisharp, Sucker Punch, Mind Games are very real. He'll probably leave it behind. So the 6 I expect him to bring include both electrics. Rotom Frost is a Terra Captain, and you know I'm pretty afraid of something like Terra Fairy Nasty Plot actually. Electric coverage is pretty decent here, but with Latios and Iron Hands resisting it, plus Gligar being immune, well, wouldn't you know it, the first 2 are weak to Fairy, and the latter has both low Spadef and a crippling Ice weakness. That sure seems like likely to me then. I'll be sure to keep this in mind alongside the very real possibility of Will-O-Wisp for Bisharp Mind Games and others, plus a potential Scarf set. Raging Bolt just has stats, man. It's a little silly how bulky it is, how strong it is, and still isn't the slowest. It has its own Sucker Punch anyways, plus a spammable Dragon move along with it, or it could go all out with Booster Energy, or an Assault Vest set with, say, Volt Switch, or maybe Calm Mind Up. Too many possibilities, and such a crazy good mon. Don't think I'm getting out of an encounter with it without losing like a mon and a half, which is just not good. Gastrodon presents the opposite threat, as is most likely Hazard Setter and Wall, I think, especially considering I have no Grass type on my side. It can be customized to tank physical or special, particularly resisting things like Pyro Ball and Thunder Punch from my 2 physical attackers, and being immune to Flip Turn from my 2 highest special attackers. Adding good stabs or Ice Beam, that looks like it'll be able to punch a hole into one of my mons that needs to wall something else, like, say, Lycanroc, who isn't the best here, but Accelerock is a great move. If it has Crunch or Play Rough for Latios, maybe Ground or Psychic coverage for Weezing, Close Combat as a general catch-all, maybe Stone Edge for damage, we've got a bit of a problem with the dog and its coverage. Moltres-Galar also isn't the absolute best here, but it's important as probably the best hazard remover and the only real way to stop Latios Psychic spam. It can already get out of hand with a setup set as well. Fiery Wrath and Hurricane are that strong. But really, you know, it's going to come down to Iron Valiant, against which I am currently 0-2 in draft. Booster Energy with Moonblast, Knockoff, Close Combat, and Psychic kind of just shreds the whole team, and I'm not entirely sure what I can do about that. Oh yeah, and he's got Terra on it too, so there goes a weakness, and there's a little more power on that move, and yeah, SD or Calm Mind, Encore, switch into a -2 Latios, not good. As for me, Cloth was a pretty quick cut. AV sets looked a little intriguing, but it's ultimately weak to all that fighting coverage, and it's still unable to break through things like Gastrodon, Amoonguss, or Fortress, plus is outsped by Moltres and Rotom and Delphox, the latter 2 of which can burn me, rendering it useless, so no crab. Similarly, maybe surprisingly, my 4th highest point mon, Empoleon, was a quick cut too. It's a similar story with a fighting weakness, and then I can't wall the electrics for sure thanks to the water typing, and I don't exactly hit back hard enough either. Can't tank well enough, walled up by too much, and the utility it provides is done by others better, so the Penguin will have to wait. Next up is Komala, who actually, stop me if you've heard this before, suffers from a weakness to fighting in the matchup. Body Slam actually looks pretty nice as a spammable option, and I wouldn't mind outfitting my guy with a Choice Band or Assault Vest, but it still struggles to do enough damage or take enough damage. Not quite enough either, which I fear will be a problem for most of the season for Komala. We're passing on it this time. Got a little tougher from here, but if you've noticed the theme, I'm cutting Bisharp here too. I keep harping on the fighting weakness, but that's the thing I'm most afraid of offensively next to Raging Bolt, Iron Valiant, and Lycanroc-Dusk, so if it's just going to go down to a CC, it's tough to justify keeping on the squad this week. And even though Empoleon resists Moonblast, it's weak to Raging Bolt, so we need to have not losing matchups to 2 of those 3 ideally. Even if we Terra out of this typing, there isn't a singular great typing that another member doesn't actually do better, at least. We're very susceptible to that Willow from Rotom as well, and Sucker Punch doesn't seem to be giving us that much leverage at all. Iron Valiant resists, it's a 50-50 with Lycanroc, and we don't even KO. Moltres doesn't care, Willow dodges it, and we have to play speed games with Raging Bolt's Thunderclap, and in the inability to really break through Amoonguss, Gastrodon, Fortress, without SD or Crocolore, basically at all, and we're not really doing enough to earn a spot on the team. Plus, we're going to be bringing better Terramons in the last slot. Man, you're telling me I can't bring 7 Mons? I really had a love for all the other 7 Mons and the plans I had for them. Unfortunately, I cannot bring them all, and despite thinking this would be the call through most of the planning process, I decided the last cut would be Mismagius. It wouldn't be the Terramon most likely anyways, as the other I'm bringing is too important, but ultimately that Ghost typing isn't enough either. Valiant and Lycanroc outspeed, even with Scarf thanks to priority, and all of my other plans for it were ultimately thwarted by, unfortunately, a lack of damage output. The sub-nasty plot set I was thinking of wasn't quite good enough to bring, frankly. Even Terra Dazzling Gleam wasn't doing enough for me, particularly when the point was to sit on and break through the slower threats. If it can't do that, I think one of my other 6 I am bringing can. And here's the first team of the season. It's a bit nerve-wracking working through all these, but I think when I finally started putting it to paper and running some calcs, I felt a lot better about it. But we still got plenty of theory running around with some unusual sets too. that isn't really the case for the Cinderace, of course, with Pyro Ball for strong fire coverage and Stab / Libero flexibility, as well as U-Turn for crucial momentum in the matchup, Sucker Punch to outspeed things like Terra Valiant, Accelerock, and most importantly Thunderclap if I can see that coming and negate it, plus Court Change as our hazard control. Yeah, no Defog in the team from Weezing, no hazards coming from it or Gligar, so Court Change could just be a huge swing potentially. If he doesn't bring hazards himself, I'm willing to sacrifice Boots in a move slot to force hopefully multiple Boots and or hazard removal options from him as well. We've got speed for neutral Iron Valiant, meaning we're only susceptible to priority scarfs from things like Valiant, Lycanroc, Rotom, and of course the booster energy. We have some other options there too, of course, alongside a Sucker Punch, but it's tough to outspeed that demon. And that's why we'll go over some of our possible defensive options, starting with what looks to be, at first glance, a fairly standard-looking Latios set. Draco and Luster Burge are spammable stab moves, minus Valiant and Moltres respectively, plus Fortress, I suppose, and then Flip Turn is the truly spammable move with Energy Ball to punish Gastrodon, trying to get the immunity and doing north of 80% to even max Spadef variants. The EVs are standard too, max speed ties the Lycanroc. I could see the match coming down to a 50-50 with it, which sure would suck. So where's the heat? How about the Assault Vest item, neutralizing some key special attacks depending on the matchup. Raging Bolt isn't KO'd by Draco if he's got, say, Haban or Assault Vest himself, but his Draco won't KO either now. Moonblast from Valiant isn't even doing half if he's timid, just hoping to avoid knockoff. Even +1 Gastra's Ice Beam bounces off now, forcing a Smart Scout of Energy Ball to avoid embarrassment. Even Blizzard and Fiery Wrath from Moltres and Rotom don't do enough to scare me as I drop a Draco, and Delphox is pretty hardwalled by it too. When I saw all the special attackers, I knew I'd need an AV set somewhere, and with a little added utility against Valiant, the Fairy Resist Berry was a serious option too for Moonblast and Play Rough from it, the Valiant and the Lycanroc. But I like where we're at with this set, so long as I'm careful about being at -2 after KOing something. Really don't want the Valiant or Lycanroc to just set up for free, which is why I'm bringing 3 Mons with momentum along with this to make sure I have the Mon in as possible, finishing the trio off with the Gligar. As mentioned, U-Turn is vital to swap around. EQ makes this a much better check to especially Lycanroc, but also Raging Bolt. Toxic is incredibly spammable and could bait in his immunities potentially too, with knockoff stopping key things on switch in like scarves or helmets that I may be ill-equipped to handle. We've got Eviolite, of course, but with such limited physical coverage from Michael, most of which is fighting coverage, which I already resist, I tried putting in max special defense instead, and boy am I impressed with some of these calcs. This makes Gligar a much better answer to things like Raging Bolt or Moltres, and the bulk is much more appreciated on an Eviolite Mon that doesn't have access to recovery. I want to make sure the 1 or 2 times Gligar can come in actually count, and while it's a bit tough to maximize a 4-point Mon in this matchup, I think we did a pretty good job here. And a Mon that should be performing in a similar way to Gligar will be the reintroduction of Galarian Weezing onto the team, also going with max Spadef investment and Toxic on the moveset. Strange Steam is my way to help make this a better check to Valiant, before Terras of course, with Fire Blast nailing both Fortress and Amoonguss, who are immune to Toxic, plus neutralizing Gas as the option over Levitate means I can ignore Sturdy on Fortress and Regenerator on Amoonguss, add in Tough Claws on Lycanroc, Berserk on Moltres, plus potentially temporarily stifling Photosynthesis or Quark Drive. The funny ability actually looks like it's the right call, just needing to avoid Earth Power Gastro really. Stopping Amoonguss in particular seemed important to me, so with neutralizing Gas, we have the Fire Blast, plus Protect as an overall utility move to stall out turns of Toxic against things or just random field conditions Michael is wont to use, while also gathering more Black Sludge recovery. Okay, we've got some defensive pieces, so what have we been setting up for? And surely things like Knockoff and Toxic aren't just for Cinder and Latios, right? Well, let's take a look at the real breaker of the team, and it's going to be Iron Hands that's taking on the role I had laid out for Mismagius earlier in team building. Substitute Swords Dance is a way for me to take advantage of the slower mons that are threatened by me and cannot break the sub, especially with lots of Spadef investment to tank hits in and out of Substitute. The offensive choices are Heavy Slam to nail Valiant while threatening most of the team for at least a third neutral, and Drain Punch to win sustained fights and heal pack up if wanted or needed, while hitting everything but Delphox at least neutrally. Lefties for longevity too. I think there could be a Mon or 2 we could take super advantage of with this set, and I want to see it do some breaking. And what are we breaking for? Setting up Toxic, stalling a bit for Chip. It's really for the cleaner this week, or what I'm hoping to be the cleaner is going to be the Terra Ground, Terra Blast, Yon Mega. Speed boost, Terra Ground rocking with that Throat Spray to boost its already modest special attack after Bug Buzz, who can nail everything he's got with that Air Slash and the Terra Blast. The idea came out when trying to outspeed Valiant. If I get 2 speed boosts off, we're ahead of Booster Energy boosted Valiant, which is great, but what about the amazing Priority and Accelerock and Thunderclap? Terra Ground says hello and goodbye to your feeble attempts at Priority 2. For reference as to our damage, Air Slash does OHKO Valiant from full, but after the Throat Spray boost, Terra Blast should be OHKOing as well, which is significant depending on the Terra type. though depending on our health, we may even be able to survive a Moonblast or CC anyways as well. Lycanroc OHKO, Delphox 50-50 before the boost from full, most Raging Bolt KO'd from full at +1, Fortress 2 KO'd without the boost, most Amoonguss OHKO'd after the boost by Air Slash. We're just looking for a little chip all around, which makes me a little sad I didn't make room for Stealth Rock, but I believe in the little bug that can. If I keep Court Change around to keep Stealth Rock off my side, Yanmega should tank a hit from most of his team on its way toward cleaning up late game. And that's the team. Nice to finally put into practice a lot of these mons I excited to use for so long. Let's hop into the match and see how it goes. And here we are, and there's a Crocolore there. It's a pretty good Cinder check, so I think I get it, and Fortress here too with all my special attackers. That's not great for things like Gligar and maybe this Latios set too. But no Gastro means we can flip turn around, and no Rotom clears some stress about a Scarf or setup mon there. Also, Iron Valiant is revealed to be Terra Fairy. That will be powering up Moonblast. That ruins several calcs, that's for sure. We'll have to be very careful there. So how do we start? My gut is telling me it's either Lycanroc as a dedicated lead or Fortress to try and get hazards or momentum, which leads to either Gligar for Lycanroc or Weezing for Fortress as my answer and response. I think Lycanroc is probably more likely, but the Gligar matchup into Fortress looks so abysmal. I think Weezing is good enough against Lycanroc too. I think I'll take my chances there. Good luck, have fun too, Michael. As, of course, it's going to be the Lycanroc. Yeah, of course it is. That's okay. That does seem to be a problem that we were having against Michael recently is the lead matchup. Either way, if we can get some chip onto Lycanroc, we can get it in range of things like Gligar EQ or Latios Psyshock. Would be pretty nice to have Willow right now, but I think I'll just settle for the strange steam damage. Or I could miss as he gets to +2. If you asked me what the worst start I could imagine would be, I think this is probably it. Oh boy, we joked before this that we do quite well in our matchups when the other misses a 90% accurate move. How about the first move clicked at 95%? This is a terrible spot to be in, and I already have to make a very sad decision. Who's the least valuable here? It's probably one of these walls, huh? Man, I already have to sack something that could have potentially answered Valiant. That is terrible. But that's our fate, I suppose, huh? Gligar is probably the play here as something that's just overall utility, even if it still exists as a nice Raging Bolt check. I'll have to rely on Latios to handle that, I guess, and Iron Hands, I guess? Probably. Let's go into Gligar as he's just going to get up to +4. Yeah, that does make sense. Yikes, max defense would already have a tough time handling this, and I sure don't have that kind of investment. Let's see what his coverage move choice is going to be. Player off as anticipated, a near max damage roll, of course, and -1 attack, of course, means EQ does much less than I wanted and anticipated, and that means it will be out of range of things such as Sucker Punch from Cinder, which is what I was planning on doing to revenge this with, to keep me from taking Accelerock chip on the revenge. Can this get much worse at the beginning of a match? It's tough to imagine that it could, as Accelerock finishes me. That makes sense. Now, what am I supposed to do? Do I risk a 50-50 with Latios? I can't afford that. Iron Hands doesn't take +4 player off. Weezing doesn't want to miss again or tank a +4 super effective option. And as mentioned, that attack drop means Sucker Punch isn't a guaranteed KO here. And that leaves only my Terra Ground Yanmega, who can, I guess, at least protect once to get the speed boost. That's about the best I can do, and that means that the next turn I can at least, I suppose, take almost half from a resisted move, near max roll, of course, to revenge. At surface, this doesn't look too terrible, but the ability to tank a single hit on Yanmega has been wasted. Gligar is gone entirely. That's my electric answers, which are dwindling. My Terra is gone, and importantly, he has switch momentum here, as Yanmega does not OHKO anything and needs to swap out from whatever he's got going on, which of course means that Moltres makes pretty good sense as a bit of a breaker. My two options to handle this are Iron Hands and Weezing, at least from what I can tell. I can see an argument for either, honestly, and we'll talk about it later too, I'm sure, but I decided to go into Weezing here to try and eat. You guessed it, a max 1 out of 16 roll from Fiery Wrath. It's starting to get a little silly, but at least I'm in a pretty decent spot here right now, I suppose. First things first, in case something stupid goes on with Berserk shenanigans, if I'm forced out, I need to put this on a timer right now. As it agility's up, I do get to at least click Toxic. At least I'm not too worried about this and the damage output coming for it right now, so I can attack. But should it be with Strange Steam? I'm a little worried about weakness policy, of course. Considering I've already had to eat a +4 hit, that would suck. And if he Nasty Plots up, that means I could be trying to tank a hit from a +4 Moltres, and that would be very rough. So how about the kind of in-between move of Fire Blast? It would reveal the Fortress tech, but that's probably fine, to be honest here. And of course going to reveal Nasty Plot, that's fine. It's either Boots or Weakness Policy, I think, with a possibility of Chesto, but that would limit its coverage to just Fiery Wrath, and that's okay. Well, even at this range, Strange Steam and Toxic Damage won't do it. And Hurricane, oh, there's a chance to OHKO from full, isn't there? Well, it's also a 30% chance to miss Hurricane? Surely there's going to be some justice and it can miss, right? Well, maybe I can at least just protect this turn to make sure that it can at least get the extra Toxic chip up first. There we go. And now it's going to be below half without Berserk proccing and in range of Strange Steam. So once again, I have a decision to make. I could switch to Iron Hands to tank 2 Hurricanes and go down in exchange for Moltres, or I can try and stay in and grab a KO unless I get high rolled. Plus I could definitely dodge the Hurricane, whereas Iron Hands would have to dodge 2 to remain at full. Frankly, Weezing still looks really good so long as I can stop missing, but Iron Hands can sub up on -2 Raging Bolt, Crocolore, or Fortress. Well, maybe Fortress actually might have coverage for it. EQ looks pretty strong here. Just starting to look real good there as I think about it. I did decide to go for the Hurricane Miss because the roll should still be in my favor anyways for surviving, even if it comes down. Though I'm running out of Terra Moonblast switch-ins. Don't know if there's more of any of a choice here though, so here we go. And yes, it hits, but no, actually it's a little tiny bit of justice here potentially because that is a mineral out of there on the other side there, as opposed to the 1 out of 16 max roll from last time. We got the mineral here, and Moltres does go down. It's technically 5-4, but with 2 weakened answers, I really don't feel too hot, especially as the next switch in will, of course, be the Iron Valiant. That does not feel particularly good, I admit. So what can we do here? It's going to probably just Terra Fairy. It's probably just going to remove that weakness. Weezing being at this low health, yes, it could come and hit the Fortress, I suppose, but there, considering I've already telegraphed the Fire Blast, something else can easily come in and do something there. It may be nice to get a Toxic off on something. I don't know if I really care to risk that, so I'm just going to stay in and allow him to Terra Fairy, Moonblast, and grab the KO. So now we are back down to 4v4. So importantly, I did not see a booster energy go off in here, which leads me to believe it's probably a choice item. With Moonblast revealed, I assume it's either Scarf or Specs. Yanmega could potentially come in, outspeed, and hit for 75%. If it's not Scarfed, that is. Plus, needing to take a turn to protect, as I've already shown I need to do, would give him a chance to swap out into something else, though admittedly a Terra Blast into just about anything else that's left would be pretty nice. Instead of that, I decided to go with the Cinderace, which I think makes some decent sense. That probably is what needs to happen. It's my only option that probably still outspeeds. My dilemma then comes to this. If it's Specs, I barely survive, and I need to get that damage off onto it to allow Yanmega to KO it later or follow up with another Pyro Ball to KO. If I U-turn out, I could go into even say like a Helmet from Fortress, which means that I couldn't take a Specs Moonblast anymore. Also, if it's Scarfed, I absolutely need to get that damage off right now, and hopefully allow AV Latios to KO it. I don't even know if I can do that with a Terra Boost, or get Yanmega to +2 somehow. But of course, if he just swaps out, which he can do much better without booster energy, I absolutely need to U-turn to keep up the momentum here. Here I thought back to my first ever Draft League battle in which I got Sneasel in against a +2 Landorus Incarnate, threatening it with Banded Ice Shard, but I also knew that Bronzong was an easy switch into the back, that if I clicked Knockoff, I could then immediately threaten that and make the Ice move that much more effective. However, my opponent stayed in and just kind of KO'd me. I had no more answers to the Landorus, and so I lost immediately. I decided at this time if I swap or U-turn as he Moonblasts, I really don't have anything I can do about that. A Specs Moonblast could just KO anything else if I U-turned out, and nothing else outspeeds except Yanmega after one turn, who would rely on an Air Slash Flinch to win, I guess? And if he swaps out, I have a Raging Bolt check and Iron Hands, meaning he'd rely on a double switch into Iron Valiant, and we could maybe play around that. Either way, I decided to just Pyro Ball here. It seemed an easy play to at least try and get the damage off. But, of course, it is a Crocolore switch. Imagine if I had U-turned, though. Ooh, I just went through why I didn't want to make the play, but it seems like that would have been pretty reasonable. Instead, it's going to be about 80% Crocolore. It's yawning that turn. That's this turn. That's pretty obvious, so now what? I did think about going Latios. I could then flip turn to go into something else pretty freely on probably Slack Off. A free swap into Yanmega does sound nice, but that does properly incentivize him. Well, does it properly incentivize him, rather, to go for that Slack Off? I'm not sure if that not putting any damage on it this turn means that he would go Slack Off this turn. And very importantly too, what if he has Protect? And on a switching move, either from the U-turn here or the flip turn on the Latios, what if he just clicks Protect to try and get that yawn status off? I don't know if I can worry about that or not. I decided I'm just going to go for the safe play. I decide I want to Pyro Ball again. That extra chip on Yawn will get him to about half, you turning out hopefully too, and that means that he should heal up as I go to Yanmega and then potentially claim a KO. See, on a free switch, Terra Blast will do over half to Crocolore in non-AV Raging Bolt and Fizdef Fortress, which this should be next to Spadef Crocolore as we count in Pyro Ball damage, and Iron Valiant as well will take over half. Take a Flamethrower, barely, even with the high roll from the Accelerock, so he'll have to either yawn on Yanmega or do damage to it. If he yawns, we can either KO Crocolore or get off another big chunk onto something else, or swap out as we risk another Slack Off going off, but at best get him out to go out and do something else, with Crocolore still at half. That game's the one I'm going to have to play to get anywhere, so of course that means that I miss the 90% accurate Pyro Ball to not get any more chip on him as I get Drowsy, which is... again, without the incentive to Slack Off, now instead of the recovery move, this will probably be a Will-O-Wisp or a Flamethrower. So it's down to this. Do I want to bring in Yanmega to do some chip anyways? Is it okay to take some damage on Latios? And finally, if I'm confident in Flamethrower over Willow, could I go into Iron Hands? I decided that it's probably Willow coming in, so no hands. Latios... Man, I could answer Scarf Valiant maybe, or Raging Bolt it could, huh? And if I can somehow get Latios to answer Valiant first, I can outspeed and chunk the Raging Bolt too, maybe? That seems very valuable to let any damage go into it, so I decided to just go into Yanmega. Hard switch just in case, and of course no Justice Will-O-Wisp is landed. It's, more likely, of course, so that's not terrible. So now what can I do? It seems like this was still probably correct. Here I could still double into Iron Hands if I want to. Flamethrower is very likely to come off. But can I break through Crocolore? Probably, actually. If the recovery from Drain Punch is enough, I should be able to at least end the encounter with a sub up to threaten something else, especially if he Willows into a sub, allowing me to get an SD behind the sub too, or I could just get some damage off. Probably would have been better to go Iron Hands looking back, honestly, as Yanmega could still outpace the Iron Valiant at least. But the sad truth is that Terra Blast and Sucker Punch do not combine to KO Valiant, and that I decide to just get off one last Terra Blast here to do some damage at least before going down. Well, it's not looking too great, honestly. At the very least, I can Revenge KO with the Latios, get the Luster Purge off, and again, technically on paper, it is a 3 versus 3, but I'm basically out of Valiant answers, and that is a full health Raging Bolt and Fortress that are also in the back, still left to do some damage. Plus, again, the switch momentum is on my opponent's side as Valiant comes back in. If it's Scarf, I've got about a 50-50 shot of surviving, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, but Spexo goes every single time, and of course could outspeed. Man, remember when I talked about the Rosalie Berry earlier? That would have been nice to have right now. I saw a similar situation happening in team building and just didn't put on the right item. And that will cost me, of course, as I go down from full. Doesn't 100% confirm specs, but I think I need to kind of try and assume that, especially considering he had backed out of the Cinder previously. Back to Cinder, again, hoping to outspeed, not 100%. If it's Scarf, I just have to hope Pyro into Sucker kills. I don't think it does, but that's the only option that I've got. If it's Specs, I need Cinder at full health and Iron Hands alive there too, so we're in the same spot again, where I can either Pyro Ball or U-turn. U-turning on Raging Bolt has a chance to be game-winning, actually, but if Valiant stays in, I am pretty doomed. Pyro Balling on Valiant staying in may be correct there, but if he swaps into Bolt, it's looking pretty bad, and frankly, for the past couple turns, I've already assumed that if Fortress has EQ to break Iron Hands' sub, I think it's probably over anyways. Well, that may be my only out, so I'll Pyro Ball and hope just to get that damage off, assuming that this is Specs Valiant. And one more time, I'm going to get another play wrong, because here comes the Lost Neck Monster. 28% only. Just get a little bit of damage off, I guess, but man, well, I think at the very least I've bluffed Scarf decently well, I believe. So now for another play, I can either U-turn out, risking Thunderclap but getting more chip, or swap straight onto Iron Hands on an obvious switch. I felt I wanted this extra bit of chip, but obviously that is going to be incorrect yet again, as the game about ends here with a Scarf Draco Meteor. Yeah, I didn't really talk about this having a Scarf, but that's possible. And then, of course, as I decide to sub up on this, it's really down to whether this thing has the ability to break the sub or not. Even then, it's a little bit tricky to say that I can do anything. It's pretty much down to if this has EQ or body press. If it can't break the sub, I could be able to get up to +2 or +4 and mostly heal up on Drainage Punch and maybe end with a sub. And if I can stay behind a sub on Raging Bolt 2 by spamming it on, maybe if it needs to Draco, then we can KO Iron Valiant with a Heavy Slam. But of course, as I SD up, Fortress does have the EQ, meaning I cannot end the engagement behind a sub, meaning Valiant will be able to just come in at the end, and for the third time in a row, Iron Valiant will be defeating me after a few turns. So you crit there just for good measure to make sure that there was enough RNG in this match. GG as always to Michael. Man, this did feel brutal for a 2-0 loss. I see so many things that went wrong in team building play and of course luck, but we did at least bring it to a 2-0, I guess. Not sure that was proper either necessarily, but I guess we'll take a look over this again. Turn 1 was a pain. A Gligar lead would have probably forced him out, as I'd like to think I'd be clicking knockoff for the obvious EQ that would come. It would make sense to put it in range of that as well. Found out later that was a Focus Sash dedicated lead. I see you, Michael, trying to gaslight me into thinking you weren't sure about your lead, or they were unsure if you had Accelerock. I see you, man, that's okay. Getting a knockoff on something like maybe a Fortress, all the better probably, especially if I could then go Cinder or Weezing to take advantage of it. But that's an enormous rabbit hole there. So instead, what if we just hit the Strange Steam? Probably very similar, frankly, except swapping into Gligar turn 2 may have been met with an Iron Head instead of a second Sword Stance. If another Sword Stance, Lycanroc would be threatened with EQ, meaning he either sacks it or is going into Fortress or Moltres. If Iron Head came out on that turn 2, same thing, but with some chip on Gligar instead. Both outcomes much better than what would occurred, of course. And that 40-some% from Strange Steam would have gotten it in range even from a player off attack drop, which was the icing on the cake of the terrible early luck, preventing me from again going Sucker Punch Cinderace on the revenge as I was planning on with the switch in Gligar. Any one of those three things being different, leading Gligar on my 50-50 decision, hitting Strange Steam, no attack drop on Play Rough, and I like my position so much better. But of course there are other factors at play. Should I have gone Iron Hands on the Moltres-Galar, or even just on the Hurricane? A miss would have kept Weezing at full, but so would have switching out. Did you know Weezing survives a Spec Psychic from full? Strange Steam back can do almost half after the Terra, or a Toxic could have gotten a little more chip on it, especially combined with the two Protect users on my team from Yanmega and Weezing. But going Iron Hands? I'm a little torn. I think I really should have recognized Iron Hands' ability to take advantage of Crocolore and utilized that due to Fortress likely having EQ or Body Press. Drain Punch recovers about 13 to 15%, which combined with 2 turns of lefties means I always refund my subs when Crocolore can't break them, which it could not with Flamethrower. But then I didn't even do that, partially as a result of missing the Pyro Ball. Sure, it was still a miss on my part. So should I have stayed in relying on the miss, risking Weezing's health and life and preserving Iron Hands', or thrown away Iron Hands as I practically did anyways with not using it properly against Crocolore with the set I brought specifically to take advantage of it? Sounds like a smarter use of Iron Hands was the play. Just would have been nice to get a little luck back after my miss, I guess, but that's just whining, really. The Pyro Balls instead of U-turns. That's a tough play to make, especially with the risk of Helmet Fortress plus Valiant just staying in. But was there a real reason to risk what appeared to be his win condition at those times? It's easier in hindsight, I think, but plays I could have made. Especially the first time, that would have definitely gotten me into Iron Hands to sub up on Crocolore, netting me a key KO there somewhere. If not on Crocolore, I could have done that all over again to get another free hit or set up off. Otherwise, if Crocolore stayed in to stop that, I'd get a KO off anyways after setting up to +6. A smart Michael, which I would assume would have happened, would probably throw Fortress in front of the Drain Punch and EQ to force me out. The problem there would be allowing in Latios, or if I was frisky enough, Yanmega. He did, though, have Ice Spinner, meaning either that would end poorly, or I could only bring it in on Fortress to get the KO. No matter the situation, that was the play. Get Iron Hands in on Crocolore to set up, as counterintuitive as that sounds setting up on an Unawaremon. Next, though, the Pyro Ball miss on Crocolore. Would have been down to me picking between Yanmega or Iron Hands again, basically giving me another chance to properly go hands, but it looks like I was stuck on Yanmega doing damage or getting a KO, so that would have resulted in some more chip damage somewhere, probably still just a 2-0, even if that went differently. A Willow Miss would have been very much interesting, and about the same way as Pyro Ball hitting would have been, both getting me much more favorable switch momentum. Roselli versus Assault Vest. Man, I went so back and forth on it. Coming home from work before the match, I decided on Roselli, but when I sat down at home, I couldn't pull the trigger. If I had, how different would it be? Valiant would be in range of U-turn from Luster Purge, meaning I'd get to more properly click the bug move instead of Pyro Ball, meaning Raging Bolt switching in would take a quarter, then Iron Hands would come in. The same thing would play out with Fortress, Valiant Revenges, Cinder KOs, then Raging Bolt KOs back. That's a 1-0 loss with damage on Bolt over a 2-0 loss with Valiant and Bolt at full. Well, Bolt took that damage anyways. But in another circumstance, wouldn't it have been nice to survive a Draco from Scarfed Raging Bolt and hit back with Draco or Psyshock? I'm not too beat up about not having Assault Vest, even if it looks like that would have made a full mon of different. With a whole lot of talk about everything that I wish were different but wasn't, here's my conclusion. I needed multiple things to be different. It wasn't any one particular thing, though I can blame some more than others. Not utilizing hands against Crocolore is probably the biggest. Not U-turning on Valiant was enormous as well, but also more forgivable. The player off attack drop was very big, as with the Strange Steam miss. The Pyro Ball miss, not as big a deal if I just U-turned, but took away a chance to make things right in that interaction. Keeping Weezing in on Moltres may actually have been right, with a Hurricane miss possibly being impactful enough to turn the whole thing around. Roselli Berry Latios could have helped, but really depends on other circumstances surrounding dealing with the Iron Valiant and Raging Bolt each. So, to go back to the conclusion, I needed multiples of these items to go right, probably. For example, Roselli Berry to chip Valiant plus Hurricane missing Weezing to help it deal with Raging Bolt would have been a W. A Play Rough not dropping attack, giving me switch momentum at the beginning of the game and keeping Gligar as a sack could have allowed Latios to handle Raging Bolt better. Combined with a key U-turn to chip Raging Bolt into that range probably could have done it too. The biggest factor, though, I think, was not getting Iron Hands in on Crocolore. I'll say it again, that's probably a swing of a whole extra mon, meaning any one of those other factors combined with it was enough. So what does that tell me? I think it's encouraging that maybe my prep wasn't that bad. Coming into the recap, I was convinced it was a big issue, that I hadn't properly considered my opponent's options and played into things like Terra Fairy, Moonblast, Scarf, Raging Bolt, and EQ Fortress that aren't exactly all that unusual. Could I have prepped better for them? Yes, but compared to using Iron Hands better, recognized them in game, and some luck, it wasn't that bad. It's also actually pretty encouraging that this wasn't totally a luck sack. Did those two misses, plus the player off attack drop, another high and max rolls hurt? Real bad. Yeah, they put me behind so early and so badly that it would have been very difficult to lab out the whole game. But also my biggest factor was misuse of that hand set against Crocolore. Combined with smart plays with Cinder U-turning properly, I may have been able to even win without the terrible luck, frankly. Imagine hands taking out Fortress and Crocolore and chipping Raging Bolt. Latios could probably finish off Bolt, meaning Cinder hitting 2 Pyro Balls and Valiant would have won, had they hit, of course, which one missed against Crocolore, but still, point stands. This appears to have been pretty winnable, even with what I perceive to be below my standard team building and very clearly poor luck. Instead, I'm chalking this up to being rusty, learning my team, and some excellent prep and play from Michael. GG again to the round 1 Birbs. I wouldn't say they're my kryptonite, considering I've still got quite a few up on him, but he's obviously a skilled enough coach to beat me even in the playoffs a couple times, and even without trying to slow roll me in the crowd with obvious plays from Lycanroc. Come on, man. I know you said you don't feel great about this win with all the hacks, but that's a part of the game, and you played well with great prep too. Well-deserved win against, I think, I'm a pretty good coach. That should wrap things up here. Don't know if there should have been an MVP with Weezing, Iron Hands, and Yanmega all doing 100 or 99% overall. It should have been Hands if I'd played it better, which would have led to better Yanmega play too, but also Weezing missed crucially. We'll skip accolades for this match and then instead look forward towards week 2 against AJ and the Chicago Clods in what absolutely needs to be a get-right game for the Bouffalant. We'll see you there.